Hello, this is Chuck Ridgway, Automation Technology Manager at Horner. Thanks for joining us for another Tuesday live stream. Now, today we've got a topic that we think you're really going to like. Here it is. Sending SMS text messages from the Horner OCS. And we think you're going to like this because it's an application which we think has a lot of usage, a lot of utility. And to talk about some of the different applications where you might want to send SMS text messages from an OCS, let's bring in our product manager, Mr. Casey Gardner. How are we doing today, Casey?
Hey, not bad. How's it going, Chuck?
It's going great. And as I mentioned in the opening, there's lots of applications that I think you could use for sending SMS messages. Why don't you give me a couple?
Sure, I think probably just pretty common to come across one where you're trying to have an alarm feature that you want some notification for. So whether you're sending an email saying the temperature's too high or too low or whatever your application may be is pretty common.
Yeah, that sounds good. And again, whether you're sending an email or today, we're going to show you how to send an SMS in that same scenario. Some of the applications I thought of, OEE. You know, if you've got an OCS that's being used to measure the efficiency of your machinery, uptime, downtime, those sorts of things, I could see scenarios when you'd want to send text messages whenever maybe you dipped below a certain threshold or something to get the right people to the machine to take a look at it. Maybe a preventative maintenance application where after a certain number of hours the machine needs some preventative maintenance. Maybe those type of messages could go to the maintenance department.
Yeah, definitely. Especially as it's an urgency factor where your text seems to come across a lot easier or sometimes more urgent than an email for sure.
I would agree with that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and present the material today. And while I'm doing that, Casey is going to be standing by answering any questions you have in the chat section if you're watching us live. If you're watching us on replay, we'd love to see your comments and questions in the comment section, and we'll get to those just as soon as we can. All right. Let's take a look at how we're breaking down today's topic. First thing we're going to talk about is why would you send text messages from a machine? We've kind of covered that a little bit in the opening, but we'll cover a few more details with that. Next, we're going to talk about how we would send text messages, and we're actually going to use the email feature in the Horner OCS to accomplish that. And we're also going to be using something called a third-party SMS gateway to ensure that the messages are reliably delivered. Now, because email is involved, we're going to do a quick review of the OCS email setup, and of course, we'll have plenty of demonstrations. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so why send text messages from a machine or a site? Well, one thing we didn't really talk about in the opening is the fact that mobile phones are everywhere, and for a lot of jobs, a mobile phone is an important tool in executing the job. Now, there, of course, are certain tasks, certain jobs where having a mobile phone handy all the time is totally inappropriate. However, for many job descriptions, a mobile phone is a key tool. And one thing that definitely happens is that if you need to bring the attention of a machine condition to the right person, it's very possible that the fastest way to get in touch with that person is through a mobile phone and through a text message. Now, again, different applications where you might want to deliver SMS texts are listed here in the screen. We've talked about a lot of those, but here's some other ones. Let's say that you've got a machine and you need more material. You could send a text message to the material handling person that can refill the raw materials that the machine needs. Or maybe you've got finished parts that are ready to be taken away. Maybe you've got a scenario where you need to get in touch with a dispatcher to come pick up a load at a factory. That's a possibility as well. We've definitely got customers that have semi-trucks effectively or trailers that are filled as part of the application. And when they reach a certain point, it's important that that load be picked up. And of course, we talked a little bit about preventive maintenance and other similar type programs. So lots of applications for SMS text sending. Now, the way traditionally we have sent text messages from machines is by sending emails directly to mobile carriers. You can see there in the examples area on the screen some of the different email addresses that are available with the carriers, and you could send a cell phone number at carrier address, if you will, to ask for that email to be delivered as a text. Now, the problem with that approach is that, frankly, these addresses are changed somewhat frequently, and the delivery mechanism by the carriers has proven to be pretty unreliable. So this is not a way that we recommend anymore that you send SMS messages by sending emails directly to the carriers. What we do recommend is you take a look at an SMS gateway service, because we have found that these are a reliable way to ensure that you can deliver SMS messages. Now, here's how it works. So, of course, first you need to subscribe, if you will. Now, there aren't typically ongoing costs for monthly costs for subscriptions, but you do need to, I guess, sign up with an SMS gateway service so that you can start sending emails to them, and then they will forward those text portion of the email to the carrier to ensure it's done reliably. And then, of course, the carrier will take it that last mile to get it to the recipient's phone. Okay, so today we're going to be using a service called ClickSend. Now, there are a bunch of different SMS gateway services that are available in the US market, and they're available worldwide. But ClickSend is a leading one, and one that we're demonstrating today. They have offices around the world, including, of course, the United States, where we are. Now, if you have a question about what does this cost, it's not uncommon for the cost per text message to be about 2.5 cents per message. So that's pretty economical if you think of the potential downtime implications and the efficiency improvements that can be gained by utilizing text messages to get the right people to the right place as soon as possible. Okay, so what's the process we would go through with ClickSend? And it's going to be typical that you'd find with other vendors. Well, first you need to create an account. And as I mentioned before, I think there aren't any really cost to create the account. You don't have to subscribe or anything. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to effectively inform ClickSend through their online gateway the email addresses that are going to be sending emails to them for delivery. And the reason they do that is to make sure they don't just respond to any old email on your behalf, but that you have authorized certain emails to send to them. And of course, if you've got an OCS that is running a machine and it's going to be sending emails to ClickSend for SMS delivery, you're going to know what the email addresses are for all the OCSs that are sending those emails, so you can go online and add those to your ClickSend account. Now, there is another alternative, and that is you could actually include kind of the ClickSend API details within the subject line of your email, and you could program that in the OCS, and that would be the other way that you could effectively authorize an email from an OCS to be received and processed by ClickSend. Now, as I mentioned before, the way we are delivering SMS messages starts with an email. And even though today isn't really about emailing, there's a lot of email included. So Gmail today is the most common means for machines to deliver email. It's not the only way, but it seems to be the most commonly used. And it's not just with Horner OCS, it's with PLCs that have emailing capability and those sorts of things. So we did a video last fall where we gave you all the details and a full demonstration on how to set up Gmail with the Horner OCS. And I would recommend that you take a look at that video. It'll provide you a lot of additional details. Now, one detail I did want to cover with you today that was covered in a lot of detail with our previous video, and that is this, that back in May of last year, Gmail changed the way they did authentication with Gmail accounts. So if you have a machine that is using Gmail, you no longer can strictly use your Google login credentials for that machine as the way of logging into the email server. They created something called an app password, where you would go online and retrieve an app password that they would grant you, and you would use that app password as part of the login credentials for the OCS. And that previous video that I referenced has the full details and a step-by-step on how to do that. Pretty straightforward process, but check out the video if you want more details. Now let's quickly just review how to use email with the OCS, specifically how to configure it. So I'll show you it here on the screen with a few slides, and then I'll go ahead and show you in real time. All right, so to access email configuration, you're going to go to the main logic editing area in CScape. You're going to go to the program menu, and you're going to select messaging and then email. No, you're not going to select messaging and then SMS. That is for sending SMS messages through a dedicated modem, which is kind of an old-fashioned approach. That's not what we're covering today. So when you see the email configuration dialog box, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to assign a status variable or a status register to email so you can receive ongoing updates on the delivery of emails. Are they going through? Are we getting an error? Those sorts of things. Now, the application I'm going to show you today in CScape will be available for download from our website, and you'll be able to use that as a starting point for your application if you choose. But again, we start out email configuration by configuring status variables. The next thing we are going to need to do is to configure the email address for the machine. So that might be something like machine123@gmail.com, whatever email address you come up with. And again, it does not have to be Gmail, but that's our example because that's the most common. Next, you're going to configure how to access the email server. Again, typically Gmail. And so you're going to configure details such as the SMTP server name, smtp.gmail.com would be the most common. You're going to configure a DNS server IP address because since we're accessing the SMTP server name through a URL and not through just a strict IP address, you're going to need to have a DNS server. That would be something like 8.8.8.8. And then you're going to assign the port number. Now, usually that port number is going to be 587 for a TLS encrypted email session. If you're talking about open text, that would be port 25, although it's very difficult to find open text type email services anymore. And then the final thing you're going to do is to configure your login credentials, which is the username and the password. Typically, that's the email address for the machine, most commonly at least. And then that password will be the app password that you retrieved from Google, again, if you're using Google Gmail. Okay, then the final steps involved are going to be creating an email directory with all the different categories of personnel that you're going to be sending emails to. Could be the maintenance department, the management department, it could be material handling, it could be a whole variety of different logical, different categories that you're going to be sending emails to. And then for each of those groups, you're going to have one or more email addresses you're going to be sending to. Now, everywhere on all these screenshots, what you're seeing today, and you'll see the same thing in the actual example program, is you see that I've assigned variables to everything. The reason I did that is so that we can actually do all the configuration on the screen of the OCS. So if anything changes in the future with our login credentials, for example, we don't have to fire up CScape and make a programming change to the machine just to change the login credentials on the email service. Finally, the last step is going to be to configure actual email messages themselves. So what group are you going to send the message to? What's a variable, a one-bit variable that's going to trigger the sending of that email message? What's the subject of the email? And then what's the body of the email? And the body of the email can be just straight text, or it can also include embedded real-world data for real-world temperatures or a timestamp or whatever you want to include. Now, in my example that I've got that you can download that I'm showing on the screen here, I embedded a timestamp for when the OCS sent the message. Let's go ahead and head right to CScape now, and we'll take a look at how we get all this working. So let's actually, instead of starting in the CScape example program, I'm actually going to fire up my web browser and show you the ClickSend dashboard here. Okay, so this is a view of the dashboard for ClickSend. I have previously created an account with ClickSend that I called Horner OCS. Okay, and I've also previously authorized ClickSend to process emails that come in from hornerautomation.ocs@gmail.com. So that happens to be the email address for the OCS I'm using on the bench here that is going to be sending the emails to be delivered as SMS texts to ClickSend. So that is how I'm authorizing ClickSend in this case. I'm doing it from their web portal. Again, I could include as an option, I could include the username and the API key with some special syntax in the subject name as an alternative means of authorizing for ClickSend to process a particular email. But I've chosen, in my case, I've chosen to go with registering it through their portal. Now, up here at the top of their dashboard, if we take another quick look at that, you should be able to see, there you go. It'll tell you how many messages that it has processed. And again, these are going to cost somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2.5 cents per message. And I've sent a few test messages over the past couple of days here, as you can see. Okay, so again, we have to establish an account with an SMS gateway service. I used ClickSend. All right, now let's head into Cscape and let's take a look at our example program. Now, most of the work in the example program, frankly, was done on the screens. Okay, so from the screens, we have the ability, and I'll use my handy dandy finger here to navigate. From the screens, we have set up the ability to enter in the IP address, the net mask, and the gateway, like you typically would do for any Ethernet application. Again, doing it from the screen means if anything changes in the future, I don't need to use Cscape in order to make that change. And then this is the login credentials effectively for logging into the email server, whatever that happens to be. So this will end up being something like smtp.gmail.com in the end that I'll be entering in here. The SMTP password will be that app password that was authorized from Google. The DNS will be something like 8.8.8.8 for whatever DNS server you're going to use. SMTP port is going to be 587 for a TLS encrypted type email session. And then I've also got a couple convenient things here where you can hit a button to load some default values here. So for every new machine you deploy, you don't necessarily have to type all that in manually from the screen, but you can still make changes later if you need to. And there's a couple of clear buttons also available for you just to clear whatever's in there completely out and start over again. In addition to logging into the email server, you also need to have the ability to assign the local email address to the local machine. In my example, I believe it's like hornerautomation.ocs.gmail.com or something like that. We'll take a look at that here in a little bit, but that's the email address that will be typed in here. And then if you're sending out emails, you're going to want to have the ability to assign email addresses to different groups, to the maintenance group, the management group, maybe material handling, whatever the case may be. Now, again, in a real application, you're going to have more than one email address for the maintenance team, more than one email address for the management team, those sorts of things. But for a quick example, that's what we've got here. Okay, and then finally, we've got a test screen where we can actually test sending an email and make sure that it gets delivered properly based on what we've set it up for. So that's where a lot of the work in this example application is. And there's one more page I want to show you, and that is the status page where I've broken down all the possible faults or errors that you could get when you send an email, as well as, the current state of the email sending engine. And if you did get some sort of error message from your SMTP server, if Google sent back some sort of an error message, you would see it here. Okay, so there is a good bit of diagnostics built into the example application as well. All right, and then I'll just quickly run through from program, messaging, email. I'll quickly run through the configuration that we showed on the slides briefly. So once again, we assign a status register so we get all the feedback on how things are going. Here's where we've assigned all the variables for logging into the SMTP server with our authentication, how we access the server, what the email address is for the local machine, and of course, everything's in variables so that I can make those changes from the screen. I just want to reiterate that one more time. And then, of course, we need to create our email directory with the different groups that we're going to potentially send emails to, with individual email addresses within each group. And then we're going to have the ability to configure a whole number of outgoing messages. My example only has 3, but included in those messages can be fixed text as well as embedded data fields. In my case, I put a timestamp here from the built-in real-time clock. And then in the subject area, if you're going to be sending to ClickSend, for instance, this is where you would include the ClickSend account or username, as well as the ClickSend API key in a special syntax here in the subject line. But again, that's only if you're sending it to ClickSend and only if you're doing authentication that way with ClickSend. All right, very good. So that's what email configuration looks like. All right, let's head to the bench. Okay, here's my home screen. I'll jump to the email section there. Again, here's the IP address, netmask, and gateway for my bench system here. Here is the address, the URL for the Gmail server that I'm going to log into when I send an email. Here is my app password that Google assigned to me. This is the DNS address I'm going to use. I typically use 8.8.8.8 or 8.8.4.4. Those are pretty typical ones. SMT port, I'm using 587 for encrypted TLS. And I've got this convenient button where I can load all these defaults all at once if I want. Now, to configure the address of my OCS, I can do that here from this dialog box. hornerautomation.ocs@gmail.com. That is the email address for the local OCS. And these are the default emails for sending to maintenance and management. You can see here I've just included my work address there. Okay. And then before we send some test emails, I'll show you the status screen where you can see everything is looking good. Everything's okay. We're not in the process of sending emails or anything, and have not gotten any kind of response back from the SMTP server for any of our emails recently. Okay, so let's start by just sending a regular email. I know we're really interested in the SMS aspect of this, but I'm just going to send a regular email in this case. So this is my test email address, which is just my work email. I'm going to go ahead and trigger the test email. All right, and the trigger button, you will see, stays on until the OCS turns it off. Okay, and that takes, in my example, about 10 seconds. There it went. So that means the OCS has gotten the email delivered to Gmail. Now we're waiting for it to come in to me, and there it is. It just came in a few seconds later, so that didn't take too long. Let me show it to you on my phone. Okay, so that's what the email looks like. This is the test email generated by the Horner OCS all-in-one controller with a timestamp of 2:22 in the afternoon, because we're live, of course, and you saw this live. Very good. So we've sent a standard email, not an SMS message, but a standard email. But we want to be able to send SMS messages because we think that that can get the attention of key personnel maybe a little bit quicker. So that's the next thing I'm going to show you. So let's go ahead, and this time I'm going to change my test email message to my ClickSend address. So this is my cell number, including the 1 for the country code, okay, at sms.clicksend.com. All right, so that's the next test email I'm going to send. Let's go ahead and trigger it. Again, it should take about 10 seconds or so to be delivered to Gmail. So we're waiting for the trigger to turn off. There it went. And now we're waiting for the text message to come in. Okay, it doesn't always get delivered immediately, but usually pretty quickly. Okay, this is a little bit like watching paint dry, right? Where you're waiting for the big event to come in. So what I have found in the testing I've done so far is I haven't had a scenario yet where I did not get a message to come in at least within a minute or so. Most of the time, it's been much more quickly than that, but I have occasionally had it come in to take maybe about a minute or so to be delivered. Okay, while we're waiting for that to come in, let's go ahead and do one other thing that is a little bit interesting. I'm not suggesting necessarily that you want to take advantage of this feature, but I want to show it to you at least, and that is this. We can also send a text message via voice, or send a message via voice. So in that scenario, what happens is we change the destination address, okay, and then what happens is ClickSend will make a phone call to this particular address and then read the message to the recipient. All right, let's take a look here. We still haven't gotten that email delivery from ClickSend. That's a little bit disappointing at this stage, but hopefully that'll come in soon. All right, let's go ahead and send a voice message and see if we have any better luck with that. Okay, again, it'll take about 10 seconds to get it delivered through Gmail, and then we should see some results one way or another. Okay, I did finally get the email in from ClickSend. Oh, but here comes the voice call. Let's listen to the voice call.
This is a test email generated by the Horner OCS all-in-one controller to 25 and 51 seconds.
Okay, so that was the email message being read to us by ClickSend through a telephone call. All right, now it did take a while to come in. It took a couple minutes, which is a little disappointing, but 2 minutes isn't bad, I guess. Let's take a look at the text message that came in from ClickSend. Okay, and that was sent at 2:24:05. Okay, so again, it took a couple minutes, which is a little longer than what I've experienced most of the time, but still it did get delivered, which is the most important thing, right? You want it delivered in a fairly timely fashion, and I guess a couple minutes is still pretty timely. So that's really what I wanted to show you today, highlighting, of course, the ability to send SMS messages through an SMS to email type gateway. And we have accomplished that, along with showing you again how to send regular emails, as well as we played around with a little bit of doing the voice call as well. Let's go ahead and wrap up our topic for today. So sending SMS messages in response to machine conditions is definitely a desired function, because we know these days people respond to text messages quickly. Okay, and seeing that those messages are reliably delivered, we think that using the cellular carriers directly, sending emails to the cellular carriers directly, has proven to be not reliable by our experience in the past, but SMS gateway services are reliable, and we do recommend those if this is the direction you want to go in terms of sending SMS messages from a machine. All right, this is the point in the program where I let you know that we're here every Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Whether or not we're fully live like we were today, or whether we're pre-recorded. And again, we're standing by to answer your questions always while we play the video that's been pre-recorded or while we present you the material live. We want to remind you this is our 10th year of the Horner Lighting Group. Check out those videos on the Horner APG YouTube channel alongside our great automation content. And we want to let you know that next week, I'm going to show you how to set up an AC power monitor using Horner OCS. So we have a really cool AC power monitor product that I'm going to connect up to an OCS and show you how to monitor things like power factor and voltage and current and kilowatt hours and those sorts of things, because we all know that energy usage these days, as well as power quality, are really important topics. Okay, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, I would encourage you to do so. It doesn't cost anything. And if you choose notifications when you subscribe, you'll be notified every time we go live or every time we post a new video. Okay, so until next week, let's all get out there and do us some good.